Hello and welcome to Pearl Magazine. Hong Kong's housing shortage has always been a difficult issue to solve. In the second installment of our four-part series on the Hong Kong SAR's 25th anniversary, we look at the different efforts that have been launched to tackle the housing problem and whether rail and bridge links offer any solutions. From generation rent to cage home residence, people can now cross the harbor without changing trains from the new territory and make quick trips to big cities in the mainland from Hong Kong. Everyone wants a nice place to live in with good transport facilities. However, Hong Kong has always had an acute shortage of land for housing, and things haven't changed in the 25 years since the handover. After the handover in 1997, the SAR's first chief executive, Tung Chee-hwa, set a target to provide 70% of Hong Kongers with home ownership within 10 years.
我哋以每年不少於85000個單位，增加整體房屋嘅供應目標。
3 months later, the Asian financial crisis hit. The stock and property markets tumbled. Meanwhile, public housing was repeatedly hit by short piling scandals. Amid the property market plunge, the 85,000 units policy became a moving target.
8萬政策變咗㗎咯喎，啊點解變咗呢？就係嗰陣時嘅，因為樓價跌咗啦嘛。
佢本來呢嗰個目標
The target was actually right. It was seen as appropriate at the time because before and after the handover, the housing situation was difficult in Hong Kong, with rising property prices and a property bubble. If only we weren't hit by the Asian financial crisis. It was bad timing. If Hong Kong had increased supply by 85,000 units a year, the situation would be very different today.
During the financial crisis, at least 80,000 property owners had negative equity in 2001. More than 10,000 went bankrupt. To stabilize the market, the government implemented a moratorium on the sale of home ownership scheme flats in 2001. This was followed by Sun's 9 measures in 2002, including halting land auctions, suspending the application list for a year, and ceasing production of HOS flats.
Rather than ceasing production for a short period, the government was withdrawing from the HOS market. I think this was a departure from the original housing ladder. In 2002, they wrongly assumed the housing problem had been solved and left the sale of flats to developers. Those living in public housing wanting to buy their own homes had to buy private housing, since there were no more HOS flats. I thought they were overly optimistic.
The government's decision to stop production of HOS flats also set the stage for the financial difficulties of the Housing Authority. During his term, Tung Chee-hwa proposed selling off retail facilities and parking spaces within public housing estates to establish and float the Link Real Estate Investment Trust. However, a public housing tenant took the government to court for breaching the housing ordinance.
Grandma Lo's action would affect the decision of whether to list. As the Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury, I was worried about a judicial review. If we lost again, it would be disastrous and we couldn't give the money back to shareholders. That's why I announced the shelving of the Link REIT's IPO.
The proposed IPO was delayed for a year. After the Link REIT was listed, there have been numerous complaints about its high rents, small businesses being pushed out, and people's livelihoods being affected. After the government stopped building HOS flats in 2002, local property prices rose. Mainland buyers came to invest in properties. The market was so heated that ordinary citizens had little chance of owning a home.
油價瘋狂任人斬，無殼蝸牛慘慘慘。
我自己就做醫生嘅，我男朋友咧就做律師，咁我哋諗住結婚買樓咧，而家就根本直情專業人士都冇可能係供得起咯。
1600幾點跌。
In 2008, the stock market was hit by another financial crisis, but property prices only fell for a short time. There were repeated calls for restarting the production of HOS flats. The government introduced the My Home Purchase Plan, allowing people to purchase homes via rent and buy. The special stamp duty was dramatically increased, and measures were adopted to regulate inflated buildings. However, property prices continued to rise, and people were vocal in their criticism of real estate privilege. In 2011, after a tenement building fire that killed 4 and injured 19, concerns about subdivided flats were raised.
处理不当的话，也会演化成为一个政治问题。所以我觉得，作为政府来说吧，对这个广大普通居民的住房问题要比较敏感。
政府會考慮不同資。
In 2011, Donald Chung announced the resumption of HOS flats. However, in 2012, property prices rose beyond the 1997 level. The number of waiting list applicants for public rental housing rose to a record 200,000.
During the 10 years from 2002 to 2012, probably due to the impact of the financial crisis and the collapse of the property market, it was believed that the housing problem had been solved, but it wasn't. I felt very bad. In 2012, I agreed to join CY's team mainly because I wanted to help with the housing problem.
我拍心口應承大家，特區政府嘅工作當中，每一範都咁重要，但係重中之重呢係房屋同埋土地供應。
When Chief Executive CY Leung took office, various measures were introduced to help home buyers, such as Hong Kong Property for Hong Kong People, the White Forum Secondary Market Scheme, and the Green Forum Subsidized Home Ownership Pilot Scheme. Among them, the buyer's stamp duty and the increase of the special stamp duty were the most controversial.
辣椒如果不辣咧，就唔係辣椒嚟嘅。不過我哋起碼可以講就係咧，喺個關鍵時刻，嗰個樓市咧唔可以再進一步去瘋狂。
We were really worried at the time if the bubble continued to grow and then burst, the impact would be devastating. That's why we hope that any adjustments would be a soft landing rather than a hard landing.
The stamp duty can increase the cost of speculators, but to boost the housing supply, land is key. The consultation document on the long-term housing strategy in 2013 proposed a target of building 470,000 units in 10 years.
It's good to set a target, but it opens you to criticism. When you mention a figure, they'd say you couldn't do it this year, you didn't keep your promise. But this was expected. We tried to explain that while we had a figure in mind, we didn't have enough land. We still had to find land.
Finding ways to increase land supply was urgent but difficult. The suggestion to develop country parks and the advanced works of the Northeast New Territories new development areas all met with strong opposition in the community. In 2018, the Great Land Debate was started. Sites on the periphery of country parks, brownfield sites, and the Fanling Golf Course were all included in the discussion.
I did not expect such strong opposition to housing development in the community. People used to welcome development of new towns. But during the last 10 years or so, some people were firmly against development. No matter which path you take, you're blocked. All paths are blocked.
25 years after the handover, people's living space hasn't increased much. The average living space per person is 172 square feet. The private home price index is getting higher and higher, and the waiting time for public rental housing keeps getting longer. At over 6 years, it's past the 3-year target allocation. Generation rent is still everywhere.
你根本就未咁多樓，冇咁多地，你覺得香港人，你覺得大家會受咩？我唔知，我想鬧我就真係好嬲嘅就而家。
但目前嚟講係有少少接近性。
At the moment, it's like a deadlock because they're all linked to one another. Over the past few years, the community said no to many options. People refused to compromise.
社會唔肯去作一個取捨。
The housing problem has plagued Hong Kong for 25 years. People work so hard, and yet it's not easy to have a roof over one's head. Some people are slaves to their property all their lives.
房屋問題咧，我覺得係優先處理嘅。土地房屋供應方面，要精簡程序，多管齊下，提速、提效同埋提量。
How housing development can ride on transport infrastructure when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back to Pearl Magazine. Over the past 25 years since the handover of sovereignty, Hong Kong saw the addition of 6 MTR rail lines and a number of highways and tunnels. Connecting the mainland and the rest of the world, there is the new airport in Chek Lap Kok, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, and the express rail link joining the nationwide high-speed rail network. Will future developments supplement these projects and help solve our housing shortage? Over the past 25 years as an international transportation and logistics hub, Hong Kong has seen major developments in sea, land, and air transport. In 1998, the opening of Hong Kong International Airport in Chek Lap Kok was met with chaos. After its inauguration, the airport enjoyed one of the highest passenger and cargo throughputs in the world. In 2010, it moved through a record 4.2 million tons of cargo. It was the world's busiest cargo airport for many years. In that same year, it became one of the world's top 3 international airports and Asia's first with 50 million passengers. To handle long-term traffic needs, the government approved the third runway project in 2015. It was estimated to cost a controversial $100 billion+.
Whenever we start building any infrastructure, people worry about low usage, and it would be a white elephant. But they prove to be wrong every time. The third runway is absolutely necessary. If we don't build it because of short-sightedness, we will be giving away our business.
Since the handover, Hong Kong's railway network has also been greatly expanded. Before 1997, there were only 4 lines in Hong Kong. Now there are 10 lines covering all 18 districts, carrying a total of 1.6 billion passengers.
I feel very excited. It's like the birth of a child, you know. And we've been working on the project for so long, and finally, this has become a reality. And particularly, it will make our citizens traveling within our city a lot easier, much more convenient.
In 2002, the government announced a study on the feasibility of merging the KCRC and MTRC systems. The management row that led to personnel changes in 2006 exposed mismanagement at the KCRC, prompting the government to push for the merger.
Whatever we do, balancing act is very important. We have to balance so many factors, okay? At the end of the day, it is the human being who made this happen. And I'm sure we learn from all the mistakes or past experience we had, and we would be much wiser, moving forward.
In 2007, the two railway companies merged under MTR's management, combining the networks in Hong Kong. A fare adjustment mechanism linked to inflation was adopted. However, after a freeze on fares during the first 2 years, MTR was subsequently criticized for always raising but not reducing the fares.
The so-called fare adjustment mechanism was put in place after the merger in 2007. Now, of course, the mechanism was under attack or under criticism for many years as Hong Kong experienced inflation. I would say that MTR is trying very hard to balance a few things, balance the interests of the passengers, interests of the shareholders, as MTR is a publicly listed company.
Apart from fares, the public was concerned about the delay and budget overruns of the Sha Tin to Central Link and construction quality problems at stations.
呢個情況有負公眾對港鐵公司嘅期望，公司為此向大家致誠咁道歉。I always say that we have suffering from an indigestion problem because MTR took on 5 major projects following the merger to build these 5 projects, including Sha Tin Central Link, including high-speed rail. And suddenly the company just could not swallow everything within such a short time. So we developed some issues, cultural issues, we developed some HR issues. So all these issues translate into, unfortunately, some negative sentiments on the part of citizens towards the corporation.
Another controversy involving budget overruns had to do with the Hong Kong Express Rail Link. In 2010, the government went ahead with the construction of the Hong Kong section of the Guangzhou-Shenzhen Hong Kong Express Rail Link, costing at least $65 billion and requiring controversial land reclamation. It was met with huge opposition in the community.
I can tell you that railway is so important in the development of Hong Kong's economic development because it leads to property development. It also enhanced the connection between Hong Kong and mainland, particularly now that we are developing the Greater Bay Area relationship. And this is very important.
After construction of the express rail link started, there were delays by black rainstorms and geological issues. Budget overruns had the final cost capped at $84.42 billion. Then there was a legal challenge to the co-location arrangement for immigration control.
呢個一地兩檢似乎變咗係割地兩檢。
At the time, some people were opposed to the co-location arrangement, saying that we were ceding territory. I thought it was totally unnecessary and even a wrong analogy. How were we ceding territory? According to the basic law and the Constitution of the People's Republic of China, Hong Kong's territory is part of China's. We're not two nations. That's not ceding territory.
3, 2, 1. Clearly, the high-speed rail has connected Hong Kong with the mainland, particularly with the system of clearing both borders in one location. This is so important because now with the high-speed rail, we can go to Shenzhen in a matter of 14 minutes. We can be in Guangzhou in a matter of 15 minutes, which is unthinkable of in the old days.
After 25 years, there are now 7 control points between Hong Kong and Shenzhen, including those at Shenzhen Bay and Liantangheng Yun Wai. Another landmark infrastructure is the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge, linking Guangdong Province, Hong Kong, and Macau. In 2008, it was decided that the three local governments would finance and build it separately. The construction of the Hong Kong section was riddled with problems. Work was delayed by environmental impact assessments and judicial reviews. The concrete test results were suspected of being falsified. With a significant cost overrun, the project's total cost exceeded $100 billion.
我宣布，港珠澳大桥正式开通。
In 2018, the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge was officially inaugurated and became the world's longest sea crossing. The bridge and the express rail symbolized Hong Kong's importance in the Greater Bay Area.
逐步形成了粤港澳1小时生活圈的理想的布局。
So in the future, we have high-speed rail, we have Southeast Central Link, we also have potentially the Northern Metropolis Railway development that will make our connection to the mainland a lot easier. So very, very exciting.
Going forward, Hong Kong is still short of 2,600 to 3,000 hectares of land. We need at least 1 million units to meet the housing development needs of Hong Kongers. Land and housing problems have always been of topmost importance. In 2018, the Lantau Tomorrow vision was proposed, involving the construction of 1,700 hectares of artificial islands through reclamation. However, there has been no general consensus in the community.
Once you talk about reclamation, people object to it. But nearly 30% of Hong Kong's population have been living on reclaimed land. If the previous generations hadn't carried out reclamation, Hong Kong wouldn't look like this today. If you do land reclamation and build large infrastructure, it'll take at least 10 years or more. If you don't make a decision today, in 5 or 10 years, the long-term plan will remain out of reach because you fail to carry it out.
A proposal to develop the Northern Metropolis project aims to provide both an IT base and more housing.
I'm very excited about the Northern Metropolis development because that will solve, hopefully, a lot of issues. Housing being one, and our connection with the mainland is another one, and also develop into some new economic transformation like industrial base. Those are possible only with the availability of land. And with the Northern Metropolis development, land will be available. And I think that is going to be very exciting.
With the Greater Bay Area development, Hong Kong and the mainland can complement each other. The outline of the national 14th five-year plan also supports Hong Kong in enhancing its competitiveness. In the next 25 years to come, how can Hong Kong grasp the opportunities to build a better future?
We keep talking about scaling out. The GBA should be a favorable factor for Hong Kong. The GBA is outward-looking and globally oriented and will be driven by Hong Kong and Macau. I expect that Hong Kong can and will play an even more important role.
That's our show for this week. Join us again on Pearl Magazine next week. Good night.